Hello again, this is Fisher Solutions, and we're going to talk about our latest sight tool we've come out with. It's called the X2 sight tool. It will do the front and rear sights of a dovetail handgun, and it will also stake the tenon sights on 1911s and other variants that have front tenon sights. It's a unique tool. I don't know of any other tool in the market that does do both functions. With our tool, it makes it very easy to use. It's very dependable. It's very solid. It's a very beefy tool, and you should get plenty of years of use from it. As you can see, the tool has several components to it. This rear block here and bolt are for doing the dovetail sights in the rear. In the front of the tool, you'll see there's an adjustable block for the screw that lands on top of the front sight, and then you've got a staking lever here which has a staking pin, so you can go ahead and wedge your tenon front sights. Okay, now we're going to cover removing the rear sight on a 1911. It's a dovetail sight. This apparatus here is the push pin and bolt. So you'll line up the sight itself with the push pin. You'll clamp the slide itself into the tool by tightening these 4 bolts. Now, we also include plastic liner inside the tool to protect the slide itself. If you've got a slide that's already got a worn finish on it or has a finish that you're not sure is durable, you may want to use some extra insulation, like maybe a cleaning patch or something of that sort. So we've got it lined up, and what we do basically is we take an Allen wrench and we start to turn our pusher bolt, and as you can see, the sight comes out. I'll try to hold it as still as I can here. In this situation here, we're pushing the sight out left to right. And in some instances, you'll know you're pushing in the right direction when you start to push on the sight and the sight is easier to move as you turn. If the sight stays as difficult, or the bolt is as difficult to turn from beginning to end, you're probably pushing the sight in the wrong direction. It should get easier as you push it out. So as you can see, the sight is out. And there you go. That shows the dovetail there. So as you can see now, we've removed the rear sight. Now we're going to go ahead and move the sight pusher block off of the tool. I pre-loosened these. Because what will happen is we'll switch this to the other side so we can push the new sight in. We've removed the block. One thing I want to cover briefly is the fitting of sights and how we know which direction to push the sight in and how the sight is to fit. The side that you're going to get it the most in is the sight, the direction you're going to want to push in. And so as you can see, I can get the sight in partially. If I can get the sight in this far, I can push the sight in the rest of the way. And one key thing with any sight pusher is that if you can remove a stock existing sight with that tool, you can install a new sight with the tool also. The problems you're going to come across is if you do not remove any material from the bottom of the sight itself to make it fit properly, as you can see here, you'll end up possibly crushing the sight or damaging the sight because now you're trying to force something in where it won't fit. Okay, so now we've moved the pusher block assembly from one side to the other for the installation of the rear sight. One thing I want to cover is the pusher bolt assembly and pin. The bolt comes with a machined hole, precision machined hole in it. It comes with a ball bearing and the push rod itself. What we recommend is to put the bearing in, which we do it here at the factory, but we want to make sure that if you have to take it back out for any reason, you want to do it in this order. You'll put a small amount of grease onto the end of the pin. You'll insert the pin, and there's a small vacuum that you'll feel that holds the pin in place so the pin doesn't come out. So that's how the bolt itself is comprised. We also include a plastic protector and some plastic discs for when you do the front side installation, but we'll cover the plastic protector for now for the rear sight. It's made of Delrin. It's a very hard material, and what happens is when you turn the bolt up against the sight, you may get some marring of the sight itself. And to eliminate that, we include this shim. So if you take the shim itself and you put it between the sight and the pushing pin, you'll eliminate any marring of the sight itself. And it's a very hard material. So as you can see now, I've fitted the sight. I'm pushing it into place by turning on the bolt. You can see the sight itself is moving. Once you get reasonably close to where you think you need to be, you can stop, but there's really no telling for sure if you're in your dead center without trying the gun out at the range. So you can bring the tool to the range and use it and do any adjustments you may need to do after that. You back it off, and you've got your rear sight installed. So now that we've installed the rear sight, we're going to remove the pusher block assembly. I've pre-loosened the bolts here. And one thing that's very important is when you tighten the bolts to install the slide into the tool itself, you want the plates to be perpendicular with the slide itself. So take care in doing that, and that way you'll make sure that you're getting a good flat surface or a flat contact when clamping the slide into the tool. So we'll loosen up the bolts on the side plates. Bring them out several turns. And now we've removed our slide. And as you can see, there's no marring on the slide itself. The plastic inserts that are in here to protect the slide did their job. No marring. The sight itself, if you look at it, there's no marring on the sight whatsoever. So our Delrin shim has worked properly. We've installed a rear sight on a 1911 slide. Okay, before we stake or install the front sight on our 1911 slide, I'd like to go over tenon sights briefly with you. There are different widths of the tenon itself, which would be the base material at the bottom of the sight here. They come in 55 thousandths, 80 thousandths, and 125 thousandths or an eighth of an inch. The tenon fits into the slot, as you can see here in the slide I'm pointing at. Now, you can buy sights that have a wider tenon and then file some material off. That's what some manufacturers will recommend, but I don't recommend that. I recommend getting checking with your manufacturer of your particular firearm and seeing what size tenon is recommended so that you can properly fit it to begin with. In this case here, we have a 55 thousandths or 0.055 tenon. It fits in perfectly, and it will be easy to install. So now we're going to talk about installing the staking lever. Now the lever has a hardened staking pin on the top of it. We start out with it running crossways for compressing or staking the front sight. It can be turned lengthways if you desire. It also has an elongated hole in it and 2 set screws and jam nuts on it. This allows you to move the lever itself and the tool back and forth for alignment if you decide that you want to compress farther in the front or farther rear of the sight. So to install it, you're going to use the bolt that we provide that has a 1/2 inch shorter length of threads on it. You can tell also by the fact that it's shiny on the end of it. We have 2 spacers that help space up the lever. So you install the bolt, put a spacer on. Now the lever itself drops down into the slide. So we drop it down into the slide here. Run our bolt through. Put in our secondary spacer. Now that we've got our staking lever installed in the slide itself, and we've got our pivoting rod and bolt seated inside of the lever, we see that we are aligned properly. The screws and the staking hole or slot are aligned properly. Our next step is to install what we call the sight stop. So the sight stop goes in place here, and when we put our front sight in place, which we've pre-fitted, of course. Got our sight in place. We put our sight stop in place. Okay, so now that we've got our sight stop in place, we have our front sight fitted, we're ready to bring down the sight stop screw. And what this does is it helps to keep the front sight from coming out of the slide when you're using the staking lever from the inside of the slide to compress the tenon on the sight itself. We include a plastic disc. As you can see here, it's a very small disc. We include 4 of them with the tool. And what happens next is we set the plastic piece on top of our sight to go in between our stop screw and the sight itself. That's just to keep from marring the sight itself with the screw. So as you can see, it's in place. That will protect your sight. Because when you go to compress your tenon sight, it's going to have a tendency to want to push up on the sight, and this will keep the sight in place. Evenly tightening your bolts on the side of the plate are important also because that will keep the slide itself from tilting or moving once you're compressing the tenon sight in place. We're now ready to stake the front sight. So we take an Allen wrench, and it takes 1 to 1 1/4 turns for you to properly stake the sight. So we do our rotation. In this case, about 1 turn should do it. And you'll want to back it off and take a look inside and just see how well you've staked your front sight. So as you can see, we have an initial slide with the GI type combat sights, the low profile sights here. And then now we have our slide that has our new big white dot sights installed. As you can see, the slide has no marring. And now you can see the difference between the 2 sights installed. Now that we've got our front and rear sights installed, to finish up the installation, what we may need to do, or in most cases we do need to do, is to remove some of the excess material left from staking the front sight in. You can take a cordless Dremel or a corded Dremel or any type of deburring tool, and you run it inside to take off some of the material that's inside. You want to take off as little as possible, and when you know that you've removed enough of the material is when your barrel bushing will slide into the slide. So as you can see in this situation, we need to remove some material. One thing that you'll find is that if the sight is, you can move the sight by hand, try moving it around. If you can move it, you can put the slide back into the tool and compress the sight tenon further. Just do that before you take off any of the material or try fitting in your barrel bushing.